Good afternoon. Welcome to another partner chat with the Philadelphia Parks Alliance. Today's guest is Philadelphia Youth Sports Collaborative's Executive Director, Beth Devine, and we'll have her on in just a moment. And first, I wanted to say hi to my co-host and colleague, our campaign director, Lula DeFersha. How are you today?
I'm doing well. I haven't been outside just yet, but it looks beautiful.
I had lunch outside, and it's a very nice day, definitely.
Well, I'm excited for our today chat. Hopefully everyone is tuned in. If you are, let us know where you're watching from so we can give you a shout out. And then, so thank you for joining us.
Indeed. We ready to bring Beth on now?
Yes, please.
Let's do that. Welcome.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Beth. Thank you so much for taking a time out of your busy schedule.
Of course.
So we had done like various meetings behind the scene, but nothing a live chat like this before. We wanted to bring you on because your organization plays such a unique role in Philadelphia in our youth. And so we wanted to talk about like the work that you do, introduce yourself, but also COVID 2020, when it first hit us as an organization, how we all just panicked trying to adjust to the world that we were given. And also now 2021, how are we thriving in the space that we are in maneuvering? So those will be the things that we'll talk about. Steve and I will be just asking you questions back and forth, and this will be a conversation.
Okay, great. Yeah, so just about our organization, we're a backbone organization that works in the area of a concept that we call sports-based youth development. So traditional youth sport, many minds go to a soccer game, two teams, oranges at halftime. And what we really do is support a system of 58 organizations. I'm sorry, 59. We had a new member join last week. And 59 organizations that use sports to really wrap their arms around a child and bring them into the wraparound services that children that maybe live in neighborhoods that are negatively impacted by poverty or other challenges need. So a lot of our organizations use sport as the hook, as we say, and then provide things like academic supports, nutritional information and education. There's a lot of organizations that focus on leadership and grit, and everybody kind of has an eye on social and emotional learning, and we support some of that work. And we all commit to having trained and educated coaches who understand the role of a coach in this process. And so those are our job, is to support those organizations so that they can impact as many kids at the highest level of quality possible. Right. The other side of our job is to work with city agencies to understand where gaps exist in sports programming and how we can work together to create new opportunities for youth, whether it be connecting them to our member organizations or connecting them to existing programs or creating new programs so that more kids can get involved in sports.
Nice. So I'm hearing this, there's an echo. I'm not sure if it's me. I'm hearing this holistic approach between your work and your collaboration with other organizations as well, serving the youth. And just going back to 2020, when we learned about COVID and everyone didn't know it was going to be a full year and still ongoing, how did you manage to interact with the youth and then also the folks that you are serving during that time?
Yeah. So, the first thing we did was really just reach into our member community and say, what are the needs? What do you need help with? What services can we provide in the area of education that will help you get through this time, not knowing what this time was going to look like, So we immediately provided educational opportunities through consultants that we've known and haven't been engaged with to talk about things like leadership through crisis. We had our board actually engage with board members from across our membership to talk about what a board's responsibility is right now. What kind of financial action should you be taking? What kind of risk management action should you be taking? Because at the end of the day, we want our organizations to stay healthy and whole, because they're the ones that interface with the kids. We do not directly work with youth. we always work through our organization. So we did it. We spent a lot of time, and then we spent a time on what are crisis communications like? How do you communicate through this time? How do you engage with families during this time? And then what we also did was we learned from our member organizations, what are you doing out there that you find is impactful? What works right now? Because a lot of people didn't know how to continue connecting in a space where people were still in the very beginning, still trying to engage the kids, and then we're shut down completely. So then what does virtual look like? Is it virtual live? Is it virtual recorded? And there was all that like learning process. So we just stayed in it and learned from our member organizations. And what we found was, live engagement virtually worked better than recorded engagement. And then over time, when restrictions eased, hybrid was the best model because the kids need their people. And the families were reporting like, yeah, we could use help with food here and there, and we could use help with equipment, but really what my child needs is their people. And so staying engaged in a live way was really important. And we encouraged a lot of our member organizations to, if you're doing that, keep doing it because the kids need it. And they knew that already. I mean, that's what they do, right? So we just tried to support the processes as best we could. Mm-hmm. And then another example of how we were kind of called into service is last summer, the Office of Children and Families was kind of doing the same with their organizations that are out there providing out of school time. And most of the summer camps were in a virtual space last summer, which is such a bummer. I mean, like the last thing you want to be doing in the summer is sitting in front of a computer learning. But so we actually were called to provide activity kits, and we put together 2,700 activity kits that had a basketball and a soccer ball and a stretch band and all these different fun things. And then a booklet that said, here is how to use all this stuff. Here are some things you can do with all of these tools. And then we distributed them through 65 out of school time partners who got them into the hands of their kids. And then lastly, we created an app that's available to anybody. It's called the Game On Philly app. And our member organizations provided content so that any child, 14 above, that they can do it. Under 14, their parents have to download it. And they can have access to a lot of instruction from our coaches, ranging in like true sports instruction to a 5-minute stretching session, and everything in between. So that's still available. It's available to anybody. So we always encourage people to visit our website and check out the Game On Philly app and bring it down to their phones and check it out.
Yeah, we'll put the links also in our in the chat shortly. But you spoke about, so wow, it was like a buildup of when you first got it when the pandemic first hit, like trying to understand the crisis aspect of it from your partner organizations. I'm curious to know what were some of the things that came up in that conversation from like the youth perspective, from parents, from your board. Were there any like takeaways?
I think the biggest takeaway was, stay with it. Really just got to stay with it. Because I know organizations were thinking, do we completely halt? And the answer was no. Like, you got to just stay with it. And it might be hard, and there might be people who, the other thing we learned is it takes a whole lot more time to engage kids virtually than it does when they come to a session and you have them for an hour and a half in front of you. Like getting connected to youth via the online methods. And then we had to learn a lot about those methods, what's acceptable. When you sign releases and have kids in front of you and everybody's out in the open, but what's acceptable communication with young people and what are parents good with and not good with and those types of things. So I'll say that the learning has been nonstop. And we've just tried to disseminate everything we've learned. But I would say that the things up front were, the responsibilities of boards to really support the staff in fundraising and we found the funding community to be incredibly responsive at this time. A lot of people thought that they would turn it all off and all the funding would go towards COVID-19 services, which a lot of it did. But we found that the engaged funders were saying, how do we help? How do we support this process? How do we make sure you stay engaged with the kids? Because at the bottom of it, everybody knows the kids need to be engaged. I mean, we've seen the slide, and we're seeing the violence in neighborhoods, and we're seeing like just an unprecedented set of challenges. And then all of this was compounded by the racial injustices and the demonstrations last summer, and kids went through a significant amount of trauma. And so staying connected was the message. Like, just stay with them as best you can, engage them the best you can. You're going to see the ups and downs because kids are tired of sitting at a screen, but everything you can do is meaningful. So keep at it, because you're doing a great job, and we'll support it in any way we can.
Now, what do you feel are the most important lessons you've learned over the last year, both in how to connect and stay connected with the kids, and how to keep them connected with each other, and also other lessons you've learned?
I think one of the biggest lessons was sometimes in a crisis, your tendency is to kind of just wait and see how things play out. And there was a period of time where I think everyone was being reactive. And I think we saw a lot more success when people were like, no, bag that. We have to be proactive. We have to shift to like a let's go get it space. And so leaning on, different entities and trying to find a way to connect to kids. And we watched our members do some of the most creative things to just get back in front of their kids, like finding just an open field somewhere so that they could stand 6 feet apart and toss a lacrosse ball around, or like, we have a member organization that some of our member organizations applied and became access center leaders. And some of our organizations found their own location and created their own access center. So, I think the way through was just to stay at it and be creative and not wait for things to change. Because it was clear early on, after about a month, that things probably weren't going to change anytime soon. So let's do what we can. And I think that everybody really responded positively.
You talked about the need of staying connected, especially for our youth during this isolation time that's happening. And with the recent uprising of the violence within our city, and how do you see just like having activities more available for our kids will help, if that will even contribute to like maybe the safety of kids really just being able to go out and connect and play?
Yeah, I think that that the answer to that, or the suggested plan for that, is twofold. One is that all available spaces need to be made available for programmed activity, period. Like we need mentors and leaders who know how to work with children in every available space, because that's the way to engage kids and kind of keep them safe and keep them in a supportive environment, so that they won't be tempted to get engaged in other activities that could ultimately result in harm or engaging in violent acts and stuff like that. And I think that we all, as we do our work, have to be really mindful of the level of trauma that our kids have just gone through. I mean, I've said this probably 100 times in the past 2 weeks. Even the most supported children have had a hard time with this, because when you think about kids, especially kids in our age bracket, which is sort of like, 4th grade through high school, but that middle school group, I mean, the only thing they care about is their friends, and they've been kept from their friends. And so I think that we as leaders in the space who work with youth have to be really mindful of the trauma that the kids just went through, in addition to the trauma that our staff has been through. People who work with kids also are living through this pandemic. So we can't assume that they're just fine. And, so I think that a role that we are kind of stepping into now is, how do we make sure that people are trained and equipped with the tools to manage themselves as well as the youth that will be in front of them. And so we're working very closely with our training and education partners to develop modules the modules are already developed. It's just a matter of how we're going to deliver them and how we're going to get people in front of them, on trauma-informed work, trauma-informed coaching, trauma-informed engagement with kids, and also social emotional learning, because the kids are going to need to kind of be re-engaged with processes around self-regulation and identification and social connectedness. Like, those things are going to need more support than they ever have. So our role as that kind of intermediary is to say, well, we'll make this available so that coaches have these tools in their pocket when they start to re-engage face-to-face at a more robust pace, as well as, the traditional out-of-school folks. Like, we want everybody in this process. that's going to find themselves in front of a group of kids to have the supports they need to understand where everybody sits in the space of what we all just went through and are still going through, frankly.
You spoke about trauma, which I'm so happy you mentioned, because I think 2020 was just like surviving, just because it was, you find out something new every day that came up, and it's whether through work, the news of the world, and the injustice that was happening. It was a lot to manage. And not only for kids, but also for the staff that are working with the kids and the families as well. So I'm happy you managed that. And I love the fact that you talked about including trauma in coaching and incorporating that, because the healing process is going to take a long time, especially as the world is opening back up again and the kids are coming back to reconnecting and the staff are also reconnecting. The world is being able to hopefully not be 6 feet apart, but a little bit more closer. That's going to look different because we are relearning about how to be in a social setting that we haven't done in a very long time.
For sure.
Yeah.
And an interesting thing about sports and trauma and sports and social emotional learning is that where we're headed, right? Where it might not be full engagement, we might not be running full games, and we might not have as many kids out there on the field or on the court because of the restrictions,
Right.
is actually a really good space for healing, using sport for healing, because one of the things that kind of settles the stressed brain of youth is repetitive movement and motion, and also skill building and confidence building. Mm-hmm. And that's what sports is just set up really well to do, so repetitive motion and learning a skill and doing things over and over and over again, that actually that's known to soothe the brain. Mm-hmm. And so sports, while all good activities run by qualified people are good for kids, sports has this edge. And of course, it's my job to say that, but sports has the edge to do a little bit more just by the nature of the activity itself. Right. And so we're really excited to get back with kids, even if it means we might not be running full court basketball games or full field soccer games, just doing the repetitive motions and getting kids calmed into an activity that supports them. Mm-hmm. And then, the social and emotional learning piece is another thing that's kind of uniquely positioned in sport because of the relationship between coach and youth and the relationship between youth and teammate or youth and, somebody else in the program. So we love all that research, and we're really excited to get back out there, and really just re-engage.
Absolutely. So speaking of what you're doing currently, what is the plan for the summer if you start planning already?
Oh, yeah.
I figured you did. But what does that look like now with all the knowledge that we have about COVID and moving forward?
Yeah. Well, the good news is the city itself and all its agencies have been hard at work trying to figure out the best way forward for the summer. And there was plans unveiled this week, and I know the school district unveiled their plans for summer learning. And what we're seeing is sort of an unprecedented effort by multiple agencies to engage providers to cover as many spaces as we can cover. Mm-hmm. So, the Parks and Rec will expand their summer day camp from last summer to this summer and engage more kids, and play streets will be back. They had 350 play streets last year, as we know, and they were ramped up. And so they'll be doing that. And then the school district itself is running a number of summer learning locations. And then in addition to all of that, there will be locations, and, the plan is still being worked out, but there will be providers in locations that maybe previously in the summertime weren't open for activity that'll be open to local families, so that we might work with our member organization. We are working with our member organizations to kind of fill gaps, like, okay, this location has a field and a gym. Mm-hmm. Can we plug a member in there to do even just twilight basketball or twilight soccer, so that kids have more spaces to safely go and engage. And, the numbers will be cohorted, so it's not like 300 kids can show up and everybody's going to be registered and in a safe way. And then, PPE just has to be in place to make sure we mitigate risk. And we have to make sure that our leaders are vaccinated and they feel safe. Because, again, we don't want to just be thrusting people out into the world saying, oh, now we can go back to work. We want to make sure everybody feels safe and comfortable interacting with children and families. So I'll say that I'm impressed by the progress just in the past 3 weeks that has been made at the city level to engage new and different ways to reach kids. And I hope what it does is set a precedent for the future, because I think that this could be happening all the time. You know, I always laugh when people like come together and this big effort to obtain something happens one time and say, well, if we did it for that one time, why don't we do it all the time, right? If everybody's on board. And, a lot of that comes down to funding, and we have to advocate for that, and we have to help drive that so that we can continue to reach kids in the way that we reach kids.
Absolutely. Steve, I didn't want to talk over you.
Oh, no.
Okay. So what upcoming events do you have? So our audience, we did put your website in the comment section, but is there anything you would like to share with our audience, and also for the folks who will be coming back and watching this later, because it's pre-recorded, that you to know more about your organization or even the membership that you spoke about?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I would say if there's parents out there that are looking for ways to engage and get their kids into these types of activities, certainly our member page offers a number of, 58 to be exact. Our member page offers 58 member organizations that do this work. Our goal is to make sure that all of our all spaces have an opportunity. And so we're working towards that goal. But I would just say the school district and the city will be putting out the summer opportunities as they're kind of locked in. But going forward, be an advocate for this type of work being included in your school. And we're happy to matchmake, and we're happy to make connections to get programs into new locations. And we want to work with the communities to do that, so the communities are best served. So that's our role as sort of that go-between. And we're not stopping until everybody's got a chance to play. We're going to work ourselves out of a job someday when every gym, every field has some good programs for kids in the neighborhood.
Someone just wrote, what is the process of becoming a member organization? I think.
Oh, yeah, that's great. If they go to our member page, there's a link there, or just reach out. I mean, we can is there a chat I can put an email address into? We can connect.
Yeah, put that in the private chat, and then I'll put it in the comments so everyone will have that. Sure.
Okay, great. Yeah. So for members, they would talk to our member guy. He knows the whole city. He knows everybody doing this work across the city. So we're always welcoming more. His name is Mike Barsati. Yes. And so members, they can reach out to him.
And if you just joined us, this is pre-recorded, so you can always go back and rewatch it. But also, we did put the website in the link as well if you want to explore and see what Beth has been talking about. So thank you so much for taking the time to be with us and tell us more about the incredible work that you have been doing, continue to do for our community. And you talked about just having a space where our kids have access to, and shout out to all the access centers who have stepped up during this pandemic and created a space for our youth and our community and our parents to make sure the kids have a space to go to and learn. And so we really appreciate you guys continuing to show up for our community.
Thank you. And thanks for all you do for parks and all the groups that you support across the city as well.
Absolutely. So thank you again for joining us. If you're just joining us, don't worry. This is pre-recorded. You can always go back and rewatch it again and reshare it on your Facebook page, right, Steve?
Absolutely. As soon as we're done here on both on Facebook and YouTube, you can go back and start from the beginning if you caught it a little bit later. And if you want to, all of our old ones are all saved there, although it's much easier to find on YouTube. So you can go there and check everything we've done over the past year as we've been doing our virtual sessions here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. Thank you again, Beth, for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good one.
Bye.